It begins in a small, quiet town in New York, where a boy named John Davison Rockefeller grows up watching his father disappear for weeks and come back with pockets full of money earned from tricks and secret deals. And this early lesson in silence and control becomes the seed of everything that follows. Because young John learns fast that the world does not reward the loud or the emotional, it rewards the patient, the careful, and the calculating. And he starts keeping a small notebook where he writes down every penny he earns and every penny he spends, a habit that seems harmless at first but slowly reveals a mind built for numbers, control, and quiet ambition. And by the time he is a teenager working as a bookkeeper in Cleveland, Ohio, something dark and brilliant is already stirring inside him, a hunger not just for money but for power so complete that no one could ever challenge it. And when the oil boom begins in the 1860s, while other men rush toward the oil fields chasing quick fortunes and gambling everything on a single lucky well, Rockefeller does something strange and unexpected. He stays away from the drilling entirely and instead quietly buys into the refining business, the part of the industry that turns raw crude oil into usable kerosene, because he understands something the others do not, that fortunes built on luck can vanish overnight, but fortunes built on control of the entire system can last forever. And this single decision becomes the first step into a plan so vast and so secretive that it will eventually terrify presidents, senators, and entire nations. And as his small refinery grows, he begins doing something almost sinister. He starts negotiating secret deals with railroad companies, deals so private that even his own competitors do not know they exist, convincing the railroads to give him lower shipping rates than everyone else while charging his rivals more. A hidden advantage that slowly crushes the smaller refineries around him one by one without them ever fully understanding why they are failing. And this is where the story turns genuinely unsettling, because Rockefeller does not stop at fair competition. He begins a quiet campaign of pressure, approaching struggling refinery owners with a simple, almost threatening offer: sell your company to me now while you still can, or watch it collapse and get nothing. And many of these men, confused and frightened, agree to sell, not realizing they have just become part of something historians will later call the greatest business takeover in American history, an event so quiet and so ruthless that it earns the chilling nickname the Cleveland Massacre, where in a matter of weeks Rockefeller absorbs 22 of his 26 competitors into his growing empire, and yet almost no one outside the industry even notices. Because Rockefeller never seeks attention, he never boasts, he never celebrates in public, he simply keeps building in the shadows, and by 1870 he has formally created the Standard Oil Company, a name that will soon become both admired and feared across the entire world. And as the company grows larger, Rockefeller begins using a legal structure so clever and so secretive that even lawyers struggle to fully understand it, a structure called a trust, where instead of owning companies directly, he controls them through hidden agreements and shared trustees, allowing Standard Oil to secretly dominate almost the entire American oil industry while appearing, on paper, to be dozens of separate independent companies. And by the 1880s, Standard Oil controls an almost unbelievable 90% of all oil refined in the United States, meaning that nearly every lamp lit in every home across America is burning oil that Rockefeller controls. And this is the point where the story shifts from business history into something closer to a thriller. Because as his power grows, so does public suspicion. Journalists begin noticing strange patterns, competitors mysteriously going bankrupt, railroad officials refusing to answer questions, and a wall of silence surrounding the entire company. And one journalist in particular, a woman named Ida Tarbell, whose own father had been one of the small oil producers crushed by Rockefeller's rise, begins a long and dangerous investigation into the secretive empire, spending years digging through court records, interviewing former employees, and slowly piecing together a picture of manipulation, secret deals, and calculated destruction that shocks the entire nation when she finally publishes her findings, revealing to the public for the first time just how deep and how ruthless Rockefeller's control over the oil industry truly is. And suddenly the quiet, mysterious businessman who never gave interviews and rarely appeared in photographs becomes the most feared and most hated man in America. Accused of destroying honest competition and building a secret empire on the ruins of ordinary people's dreams, and yet despite the outrage, despite the newspaper headlines calling him a monster, Rockefeller remains eerily calm, continuing his daily routine of quiet prayer, careful record-keeping, and unshakable discipline, almost as if the public anger cannot touch him at all. And this strange calmness only deepens the mystery surrounding him, because how can one man cause so much fear and outrage while himself feeling nothing but peace? And the tension finally reaches its peak when the United States government begins a massive legal battle against Standard Oil, accusing the company of illegally monopolizing the entire industry and crushing free competition across the country, a battle that stretches on for years, working its way slowly and dramatically through the American court system while the public watches anxiously. wondering whether the most powerful business empire in the world can actually be defeated, and finally, in 1911, the Supreme Court delivers its shocking verdict, ruling that Standard Oil is indeed an illegal monopoly and ordering it to be broken apart into 34 separate companies, a decision that should have destroyed Rockefeller's power forever, but in one final twist that no one expects. The breakup actually makes him even richer, because he owns large shares in every single one of these new companies, and as they operate independently, their combined value skyrockets far beyond what Standard Oil was ever worth as a single entity, turning what was meant to be his downfall into the moment his fortune multiplies beyond imagination, making him, almost overnight, the richest man the modern world has ever seen. And yet here comes the most unexpected part of the entire story. The final twist that surprises even those who have studied him closely. Because instead of continuing to chase more power or hiding away with his fortune, an older Rockefeller begins quietly transforming into someone almost unrecognizable from the ruthless businessman of his younger years, giving away enormous portions of his wealth to build hospitals, universities, and medical research centers, funding the discovery of treatments and vaccines that will go on to save millions of lives long after his own death, creating an institution dedicated to scientific research that helps defeat diseases once thought incurable, and slowly, strangely, the man once called a ruthless monster becomes remembered by many as one of history's greatest philanthropists. And this is where the true suspense of his story lies, not in gunfights or car chases, but in the haunting question of who John D. Rockefeller truly was, a cold and calculating man who crushed everyone in his path without mercy, or a quiet visionary who simply saw the world differently and used that vision first to build unimaginable power and then to heal the world he once dominated. And perhaps the most unsettling truth of all is that he may have been both at once, a man capable of quiet ruthlessness and quiet generosity living inside the very same soul. And even today, more than a century after his rise, his story continues to raise a chilling and unanswered question that still echoes through the halls of business and power. How far is too far when chasing success? And can a person who builds an empire through secrecy, pressure, and control ever truly redeem themselves through the good they do afterward? A question that remains just as mysterious and just as unsettling now as it was in the dark. Oil-stained days when a quiet bookkeeper from Cleveland first began building the most powerful and most feared business empire the world has ever known.